Hello. Yeah, the talk is about like the hidden powers of MCP gateway, and like the whole talk is about a gateway we actually never wanted to build in the first place, but we ended up building it. We open sourced it, and yeah, happy to share my story. I'm Philip Miglinci from Vienna, Austria. I founded with my co-founder Louis the company Glasscube 3 years ago to this date. We've been to SF last year, attended Y Combinator batch, and has always been building open source infrastructure. We initially started a little bit in the Kubernetes space, and then helped companies deploy to on-premise and different kind of systems, and build an open source tool for this, which is called Dister. And when we initially like talked with the first users and MCP came up, we said, oh, we definitely want to build an MCP server for Dister. So we got our hands dirty, built an MCP server, then we said, okay, streamable HTTP as a protocol evolved, and we also want to add auth for it. And it was like super hard in the beginning to add auth, and we said, we really want to do it. And so we implemented like a gateway that abstracts all the complicated parts. And when we launched it first, and like also the first couple of friends started using it, we thought, oh, we might even give it its own name, its own GitHub organization, and we now like work on it on the term like HyprMCP. And if I'm talking too fast, please like nod or give me any hint. Yeah, I'm usually like, I'm also a runner, and I usually tend to talk very fast. So I really try to talk slowly. And as a small side note, the picture you saw in the beginning was taken by me this morning when I was running for London, and I was really thinking, okay, like the Tower Bridge looks so nice. I definitely need to change the intro picture of the slide. So yeah, if I'm talking too slow, just remind me of the Tower Bridge, and I'm gonna try to speak more slowly. Yeah, but we're gonna talk today about HyprMCP. And we already heard it from Will in the intro. There are a lot of different talks about gateways and different types of gateways. And I think the original, the OG gateways were the kind of protocol translators, right? We know Super Gateway, which made it possible for STIO MCP servers to be accessible via HTTP and server-side events, right? Or MCP remote, which also does this kind of translation layers. But yeah, I think server-side events are dead, right? Let's remove them. Perfect. And one of the second use cases for gateways are definitely like OAuth and DCI use cases, which we also had like a lot of talks about already today, which we're going to explore later on. And I think one of the third use case, which is I think also a lot of like gateways like ContextForge, OAuth, they also are a little bit in the orchestration and server management layer. And fourth but not least, I think gateways are also a great way to collect metrics and help you with analyzing your MCP server and getting deep insights there. And I really think that the reason why every one of us is building gateways at this exact moment is because the protocol still lacks in a lot of specs and a lot of like details, and we are all aware of it, but we want to like fix these problems now, so we're creating this kind of gateways. And these kind of features, or these kind of gateways especially, like authentication, security, and metrics, are also what I kind to refer of the Cloudflare of MCP, right? So if we solve these kind of gateways really good, we can say, okay, this is an application similar to Cloudflare, which does what Cloudflare does for websites. These kind of gateways can do for MCP servers. But let's all take a little step back, right? We are super in the weeds. We know every little detail about every spec of MCP, but what are the current like top 3 problems of MCP servers? Not with us in the room, but overall with users. So if anyone has a problem, please shout it out, and yeah, I will try to, let's see if it's on the list. What's the top 3 problems of MCP server right now? Okay, authentication? Sessions. Anything else? Security, okay. Pardon? Quality is a good point. But if we like go one step back, I think we talk, pardon? Observability. Okay. I think we talked to so many users, and the number one problem of MCP servers is still they're hard to install and use. Number one issue, and every one of us in the room probably had this experience. We tried out an MCP server and it did not work. I wasn't able to configure it in my client. I didn't get the right URL. I think the first moment I even saw an MCP server, I tried to put the URL in the browser, and I was really sad that nothing happened. Right. So number two problem, we heard it like analytics, especially into the gRCP messages. Yesterday at the speaker dinner, I talked with a fellow speaker, and he said he really tried to debug an LLM client just to understand and see what's the payload of the gRCP message looks like, right? Because there's no kind of visibility into the whole gRCP message, because we create this HTTP stream and then send this like gRCP messages via SDDIO or like HTTP, but server-side events, but there's no way of inspecting these kind of messages. And he actually wasn't able to debug the client, and he ended up using Wireshark to understand it, right? Third thing, we heard it a couple of times. It's only number 3 on my list because most of the users or problems just don't even come to the OAuth part. They are stuck with either configuration or with analytics of the gRCP message. And yeah, but I'm really not here to complain about MCP or the protocol. I'm really here to fix it. And this is the whole like origin story about HyprMCP. We actually never wanted to build this gateway, but we ran into these problems and said, okay, let's try to fix it. And this is the kind of platform which we might like carve out of it, which like sits between users, AI agents, LLM clients, and all the upstream MCP servers and other APIs. And with HyprMCP in the gateway space, we can hopefully tackle these problems. But before talking any longer, I want to start with a demo of the HyprMCP platform. And I hope the demo gods are with me. So we're going to create the new organization. Let's call it MCP Dev Summit. Perfect. And we need a new project. And one of the MCP servers I'm going to play around is the who am I MCP. And we have on our HyprMCP GitHub, we have an MCP server that is able to tell you if you're authenticated or not authenticated. And we can think of it, this is like already our hosted MCP server, right? This can be our website URL. And we are now similar, we are configuring Cloudflare in front of your website. We can now configure HyprMCP in front of our MCP server. And now when continuing, we're actually deploying our open source gateway into our own Kubernetes cluster and checking and making sure that the CNAME and the certificates and everything is valid. And hopefully, in a couple of seconds, we have our gateway deployed, yes, and have a valid MCP URL we can work with, right? And I think the first and the biggest problems I was talking about is like people don't know how to connect to the MCP server. So one of the neat things our gateway does is when we are opening this new URL in the browser, we are checking, okay, what does this user actually want? Is it an MCP client who looks for a streamable HTTP protocol, or does it actually want simple text HTML? So if a user wants text HTML, we give them text HTML and give them instructions on how to add your MCP server to your LLM client, and we can extend this list, and we just added codecs, which is not yet live, but yeah. And in the settings for the demo sec, I'm now disabling telemetry and authorization, just to show you that the MCP server also works without telemetry and authentication. So I'm using Cloud Code. I'm now just copying the configuration command, and then we're here in a temp folder, and Cloud MCP list. It shows that there are no MCP servers configured. We're going to configure this newly created MCP server and open a Cloud session. Look for the MCP server, and it says it's connected. Perfect. This looks good. We're going to look for the tools, and it says the Who Am I tool. It's a tool that gives me information about myself, right? So then let's ask Claude, who am I? thinking. Perfect. He found then a tool to use, we allow it. We didn't authenticate or do anything, so probably the MCP server will say, yeah, you're not authenticated, right? So let's remove the MCP server again. Perfect, it was removed. And look, let's go back to the platform and enable analytics, right? So, and if we now connect to the MCP server again. Perfect, we connected it, we're now getting glad. And now we're asking again, Claude, Claude, I am at the Dev Summit and I am doing a demo, but who am I? Let's see what it does. It hopefully finds a tool. It will ask the tool. Oh no. Oh, perfect. Yes, it will ask the tool. I'm still not authenticated, but I enabled analytics, right? So let's go back into our platform, and we're gonna have the first tools ready. And if we exit now out of Claude, we should, and it might take some time until it really popped up, but it popped up. You see, like we can now in the HyprMCP gateway only get insights into the prompt we actually used. So you can do like real evals on which is the prompt, which is the tool response, and can get details logs into the raw gRCP message, the raw gRCP response, and all the like history and the exact prompt a user asks. But you want to guard your MCP server and you want to test the authentication stuff and how hard is it really to add authentication to your MCP server. I think it's just a checkbox more. We're going to add it, and we again go to Claude, look for the MCP. We see we're disconnected. We need to enter to log in. We need to authenticate. We're just opening the normal OAuth flow. We're going to take a look in detail in how it works. We're going to authenticate with GitHub. Perfect. We successfully authenticated. And now we ask Claude again. Claude, who am I now? And let's see what happens. Yes, we want to call our MCP server. And our who am I MCP server is now able to understand the authorization header and tells me, oh, my name is Philip, my email address is pmig@glasscube.com. So if you have any questions, you know how to contact me. And yeah, so we really demonstrated how a gateway can help you with simply putting it in front of your MCP server with authentication and analytics. And now we're gonna go back to the slides and understand what we did here in detail. So OAuth and DCR, why is it so complex? All of us, like as developers, we probably never touch authentication. If we touch it, we only touch it once. And we might even buy any off-the-shelf solution. So now we are all trying to build an MCP server and adding authentication there, but we have never done it before, so it's normal that we are not like proficient in doing it and cannot do it easily. Second, there's a big difference between OAuth 2 and OIDC. OAuth 2 is for delegating access, and OIDC is more for identifying users. So it's totally normal and okay that OIDC providers like GitHub don't really work perfectly together with MCP, as MCP is using OAuth 2 and not OIDC. And I can go into more detail, and we actually wrote a blog post about the details between OAuth 2 and OIDC. And the second thing is, we heard about like dynamic client registration in the other room a lot, but there was actually no use case for dynamic client registration before MCP popped up, right? So normally we are used to creating an app on this kind of in the identity provider, and then we know like who created the app, so the identity provider can associate us our identity with our app. But with dynamic client registration, every client creates every LLM client creates its own client. So like this is nothing, it's in the spec, but there was no valid use case before MCP. And the second thing is, like identity providers and MCP clients, they are full of surprises, they're doing everything they want, and this is okay, but we wanted to fix it. So yeah, I think this is like doing MCP installation with OAuth is just a nightmare. In the ideal world, how should have authentication look like, right? As an MCP server, we're going to protect our tools and respond with a 401 authorization header, and then we communicate the URI of the protected resource request, which is on our auth provider, right? This is how it looks like. This is the only thing we should do. And our auth provider then responds with the authorization server metadata, accepts the dynamic client, and performs the overflow, and also makes sure that the cross headers are set correctly, because if you're doing like fancy calls in the front end in a browser, cross-origin request security is a thing. And as said, this is how we wanted to build our MCP server for distro, and we looked which identity providers are out there that support all these features. And we didn't find a single one. Keycloak got close, but they don't support the cross for dynamic client registration. Else we would have gotten with Keycloak, although it's like super old. But we said, okay, open source provider, we have some budget, let's go to the established vendors, commercial ones. Which one of these commercial vendors can be used for MCP authentication? And the answer is none, right? There's no single authentication provider out there that supports MCP authentication out of the box. A lot of them support client registration via an API, and then you can do a gateway thingy and yada, yada, yada. But we said, okay, if we have to build a gateway to support upstream IDPs, we might roll our own authentication from the ground up. And we said, yeah, it's super easy. We just put a gateway in front of the MCP servers. So we say, okay, the LLM client first singly authenticates with our gateway, and then all the MCP servers are authenticated, and we're using DEX. We're coming from the Kubernetes world, right? It's a federated IDP, and behind DEX, every one of us can configure its own IDP or GitHub OIDC, which there are adapters for. So we made sure like all the MCP servers are authenticated against DEX, and all these MCP servers can then easily get the identity from DEX, and it does not matter like who the upstream IDP is. And also we heard a lot about like the second hop or the chain of MCP servers. Every MCP server further down the line gets propagated the authorization token, which they can validate against DEX. Like it's a zero trust environment. And if DEX says it's not valid, it's a JWT, so as long as the token is valid, it's valid. But you get the point. So how difficult is it actually to add this kind of gateway to your setup, right? Configure your upstream IDP, then you just need to put your current MCP, upstream MCP URL into the proxy path, then define like what the subpath of your proxy is. You need to take care about the SSL certificates, deploy and host the gateway, and need some more configurations, right, depending on your exact use case and your LLM clients. But in the hosted version, we take care of this, but you can easily do it yourself. And I really always like to talk about real-world use cases, right? And one of the gateways that are out there is like, for example, ContextForge. And if you use ContextForge, you have a beautiful web UI where you can log in with your normal username, password authentication. You can use the ContextForge API with API tokens, but they created like virtual MCP servers, which are MCP servers that group kind of tools. And they had no way of how to authenticate these kind of virtual MCP servers. So they just used our gateway in their latest release, I think 0.71. HyprMCP is integrated into ContextForge, and you can add dynamic client registration and OAuth to virtual MCP servers for ContextForge, right? It was that simple. They just needed to add an additional component to the Docker Compose. They're already using MongoDB, so they're using now one gateway more. We don't have that much time, so I will not go into the every like request of the OAuth swim lane chart, and I also think that everyone has at least seen this swim lane chart once. But the important part is like, first we take care about all the OIDC, dynamic client stuff. Then as soon as you get your access token, you then can talk with your upstream MCP server. And you can do this as long as the token is valid. But the important thing, I think, in this swim lane chart is that all these complicated tool calls until there are done by HyprMCP and DEX, right? There's nothing you or the upstream MCP server needs to take care about. And the upstream MCP server only gets MCP requests that have a valid authorization token. So again, think about like Cloudflare for MCP, and Cloudflare makes sure that there are no bots or nobody that is like not a legit user access your MCP server. So, and the second thing about which I was talking about was analytics. We already saw that we are able to see the prompts in HyprMCP, and we're doing it differently than normally. I think normally there are actually a lot of analytics tools out there, and none of them, I think, Sentry now created a real good SDK. You can use like Postdoc or any other analytics tool to implement the SDK, but it goes fast. It's probably already somewhere in your analytics stack. You get customized events, and you have a kind of lightweight implementation. So probably already have this kind of SDK approach. But I think if you're using like an application layer approach, you're going to miss on all the calls that don't go through. Because if you only monitor something inside your application, your business logic, then you cannot know of anything that like tools initialize requests, authentication fails, are there any resource requests, and so on and so on. So yeah, this is like a really critical issue. And we said, okay, we already have this architecture, gateways already there. Why not intercept all the analytics related parts and send it to our analytics backend, right? And this is the swimline chart. And easy this, we see on the HyprMCP gateway, we send a webhook to the analytics, and yeah. And the thing with the prompts, I promise you, I show you the secret on how we get the prompts on a MCP server level, because this is the most asked question. And the reason is we're doing something bad, I'm sorry, but we are taking the upstream tool list response from the upstream, from the original MCP server, and as you're already unwrapping the GRCP message to do all the like funky authentication stuff, we're just injecting further parameters into the tools list response that ends up to the client, and then the LLM clients just gives us additional arguments for the parameter call, which happen to include the actual prompt and the prompt history. And then we strip it out again and send the stripped request again to the MCP server. So the MCP server doesn't even know that your gateway got aware of the tool call and the tool history. And to make it more clear, like this is how the tool list response should look like. It says, okay, my MCP server has one tool that has a tool name, and these are my properties. Like it has the ID. In this case, you need to give any ID to an MCP server, you get some response. But after our gateway, right, we added the prompt analytics and the history analytics parameters or properties, and this will be then filled out by the LLM client. One of the downsides, it costs a little bit additional context, right? Because this will then also be sent to the LLM. But this is how we did it, and I think this is a super innovative approach, and I think nobody else did it yet. Probably a lot of people will do it now, but yeah, at least we contributed. Yes, so these are the advantages, right? You get complete visibility if you're doing analytics with a gateway approach. Completely protocol agnostic. You can capture all the events, even the failures. And yeah, I think in sake of time, I'm just increasing my speed a little bit. So that's some of the metrics you can get. You can get like from the user agent, you can get the client, you can get the top performing tools, the worst performing tools. You can even get like the prompts as we saw in a live demo. And yeah, I think, so for whom is a gateway there? I think for everybody who are like us, who just wants to build an MCP server and doesn't want to take care about authentication. Yeah? And everyone who uses like Cloudflare for their website should think about using like a gateway or HyprMCP for their MCP server to get all these features. What's the future work, right? We are still super, super early. We have a wait list, so we need to onboard more users, and we don't want to run before we can walk, right? So we're onboarding users step by step, day by day. I think once we're ready, we're gonna officially launch, hopefully next week or the week after. Hopefully you're gonna see the launch, and then with an open up registration, everyone can play around with it. And then we want to decouple from DEX, right? We are currently using DEX as a federated IDP, but we want to directly integrate in the upstream IDP from the enterprise users. Because if you're already using one IDP, we want to be able to directly talk to the IDP and have the dynamic client registration separate. Yes, then obviously directly integrate with all the auth providers out there, so have like a seamless experience. And the next feature that's really, really high up on our backlog is, as you're already inspecting and intersecting all the GRCP messages with the payloads, we really need to add blocking rules. So we need to make sure that people in your organization, people are using, if you want to control like MCP usage in your organizations, you don't want to allow any prompt, you don't want to allow any data leaving your organization. So we want to allow you to block certain requests from reaching the upstream IDP MCP server. So right, you might want to make sure that not everything goes to Atlassian, not everything goes to the GitHub MCP, and you need to protect this on a gateway level. Last but not least, I think this is the task everyone in this room has to do, is like keeping up with the protocol. And I'm pretty sure that some of the stuff we fixed will be fixed on a protocol level, but new stuff will arise, and we're then gonna need to fix it on a gateway. So that's it for me. This is the gateway we never wanted to build. If you want to join our waitlist, scan the QR code. We're going to onboard you as soon as possible. And if you want the slides or any additional material, please message me on LinkedIn. And thank you very much for having me.